I, okay, we're gonna be watching games where respawning is canon. Get into it.
Respawning is just a game mechanic that happens and we accept it. You die, you reload your last checkpoint, and you move on. No questions asked. But for some games, there is a specific in universe explanation for why you are able to come back after death.
The one that comes to mind for me is Elden Ring because the Rune of Death was broken, so people were able to respawn. But I'm
And
sure
that's
there's
what
a
we
lot of
figured
other games. Ooh, like Hades. I do remember that Hades has an
to talk about.
in-game respawning mechanic.
Also, hi, my name is freaking Nick, and I'm here to make you think about death and get sad and stuff. The first thing that I think we should do is highlight a game that does not give a lore explanation for respawning, but the game is better off because of it. And that game is God of War. One of the most unique aspects of God of War is that it is filmed as if it were done in one take. What this means is from the moment you hit the start menu to the moment you roll credits, there are no camera cuts. The camera will seamlessly flow in and out of cutscenes and follow where your attention is supposed to be. So
Yep.
if you were to swamp ass an entire playthrough of God of War without dying, you would have one single continuous take. While most players probably don't notice this, at least on a subliminal level, what this does is it enhances your immersion and it makes the game feel a little more personal because Kratos is constantly the focal point. The only
Mhm.
time the camera does break is when
Yeah,
you
until it switches to making you play as Atreus, and then you get bored for a little bit. But that doesn't matter, right? Because you do get to play as Kratos
pause
for
or
most
when
of
you
it.
die. And it's that stylistic choice that gives dying this increased sense of wrongness in God of War. This is not supposed to be happening. The story is being cut short, and your continuous take just abruptly ends. And the sequel, God of War Ragnarok, does this exact same thing, but they break their rule one time with a forced death.
And it was so cool. It was so sick. This cutscene is amazing
Watch
with
this shit.
Thor.
Oh no. I say when we're done.
Yeah, that was so surprising. That was sick.
Did you see that shit? You get the death screen, so your first instinct is to ask, what the hell did I do wrong? Only for Thor to just defibrillate Kratos out of the loading screen. I think this perfectly illustrates why not all games need a lore reason for respawning. Choosing to not come up with a lore explanation for why Isaac Clarke is able to bounce back from being cut in half is a lot better than saying that there's a special med bay on the Ishimura that can reassemble him from his meat chunks. That being said, if it's used sparingly and in the right context, giving a canon explanation for dying and respawning can add a lot of charm to a game and make the lore a little bit more interesting. One of the ways that developers deal with your death and your subsequent respawn is they look you in the eyes and they say,
It's a total fabrication. It never happened.
Ubisoft is a pretty common user of this trope. The Assassin's Creed franchise takes place in a simulation called the Animus, where you control the body of an assassin who lived generations
Yeah, I should have assumed that Assassin's Creed would be on here.
ago, and you live through their memories. Death is merely considered a desynchronization between the person controlling the assassin and the assassin themselves. It only happens when the person inside the Animus has a canonical skill issue, and thus the people monitoring the Animus need to reboot the system and let you try again. I have a sneaking suspicion that 90% of the reason why the Assassin's Creed games take place in a simulation is because Ubisoft thought it would be cool to give lore explanations for the heads up display, the pause menu, and all the usual video game stuff that we take for granted because all the plot related stuff outside of the Animus feels kind of thrown together, but that's another video for another day. Bastion by Supergiant Games is another game that makes your death non canon in a lore specific way. The narrative is framed like a story being told after the fact, and whenever you die, the narrator just kind of retcons it in the moment.
And then he falls to his death. I'm just fooling.
Other games that do this are Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, and Call of Juarez. The Grand Theft Auto series is yet another franchise that deals with death by just not
I did not know Grand Theft Auto has an in lore responses. Wait,
letting you
what?
die. Whether you get shot in the head, fall from an airplane, get blown up, or eaten by a shark, you will simply appear at the nearest hospital fully healed. And even though GTA is a satire on American culture, the hospital will not put you into crippling debt and instead will take a modest amount based on your net worth. This way of dealing with your character's death by saying that it never actually happened helps perpetuate the myth of your character. And
Okay.
it suits the narrative of these games to do so with their protagonists. Ezio Auditore wouldn't be caught slipping like that. And Grand Theft Auto is about acting uninhibited because it is a video game and there are no real consequences. It would cheapen the narrative to say that Joel or Isaac has this level of invulnerability, but for these characters, it works quite well.
Everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death.
Another common way for games to deal with your respawning is to say, you actually did die, but here's a brand new body. Go out there and have fun. One of the most famous games that does this is Nier Automata. In this game, you play as an android who's trying to help humanity retake planet Earth. And since you are an android,
I
you have the ability to
I got nothing to say on this game. I've never played this game, never really seen this game. I know 2V,
have your
but that's about it.
consciousness transplanted into a new body when your current body ceases to function as a normal body normally would. This is done deliberately by the characters a handful of times during the narrative. Whenever they find themselves in an unwinnable position, they just blow themselves up by detonating their black boxes and they go back to
Bro.
home base. They don't care too much for their own physical well-being because they know that their sense of self is just stored on a server. There are a couple of story missions
Yeah.
in which the
Okay,
server that
makes
stores your
sense.
consciousness is offline, and in those instances when you die, you instead just have to reset to your last save. Which makes sense, they don't want to make you start over the entire game. But the major downside to dying in Nier Automata is that any chips that were installed into the operating system of your character will have to be recovered by returning to that dead body and reclaiming them. Another fun way that this is further developed is if you are connected to the internet.
Bro, low-key, that's like Arc. Arc got it in canon, like oh, the overseer, blah blah, just putting you back into the world, and then you got to go re-get your
You can
loot from your
also find the
body.
dead bodies of other players and either scavenge them for resources or reanimate them to assist you for a couple of scuffles with the robots. I really like the way that Nier Automata handles death because the androids, they feel like they're so much superior to the robots because they're much more approximate to humans, and yet they are so flippant with their mortality that they'll just let themselves die knowing that they will respawn, when not being able to respawn is a key component of being human. Destroy All Humans is another game
Exactly,
that lets
fair.
you cheat death by transferring your
Nice little philosophical take. Yo, I cannot talk.
consciousness to a new body. Kind of. You are a member of an alien species that is invading planet Earth known as the Furon. They are a warmongering species that got so into using nuclear weapons that the radiation wiped out their ability to reproduce. As such, the survival of their species relies on them cloning themselves over and over and over again. The only way to
Mm.
truly kill a Furon is by destroying their DNA kept in the cloning banks. So when you die and destroy all humans, you are simply replaced with a clone of yourself that has all of your memories. This way of incorporating your death and your respawn into the narrative can sometimes soften the blow of dying. However, in the event of a permanent death in the narrative, it just makes it hit so much harder because you know that it is for real this time.
Hmm. I've never heard of that game too. It looks pretty. It looks pretty unique, pretty cool.
It's a type of gimmick that I feel like only games like Nier Automata can pull off effectively, since it is a game about being human and about mortality. I also think this works in a narrative perspective for Destroy All Humans because it shows how detached from humanity the Furon are. The Furon are so consumed with war and with conquering that they evolve to the point where they no longer have to fear death because there are an infinite number of copies of them that they can just replace themselves with. So in conclusion, I feel like this way of explaining away your death and your respawn is really great for video games that deal with the themes of humanity or mortality.
You just hurry up already?
This next game starts with your
Whoa.
death, and then you wake up. A few minutes later, you die again, and then you wake up again. And that's when you realize that you are caught in a death loop.
Ah.
Towards the start of the game, a few things become clear.
What's this? This is what movie is that? Is it based off of? I forget the name, but I know what
You've
it's
been
a
in this
reference
time
to.
loop for a long time. Only you and someone named Juliana can remember anything that happened in the prior loops, and
Yep.
Juliana is trying to kill you because you've been trying to end this cycle. Death Loop's time loop exists
Okay, but why should you want to keep the cycle going? Fucking weirdo.
only on the strange island on which you reside. No matter what, at midnight, everything will reset to as it was at the start of the day. And somehow, this time loop is linked to 8 individuals known as visionaries. If all 8 of them are dead by midnight, the loop will end. If any one of them remains, the loop continues, and since the island resets, they will all be alive once again. On the contrary, though, the same applies to you. If you are killed, you will also wind up alive at the start of the day once the clock strikes midnight, keeping nothing that you gained except for your knowledge. The whole plot of Deathloop revolves around finding the golden loop, or the 1 in a million scenario in which you can kill all 8 targets in the course of the day. The only problem is that thanks to Juliana, everybody knows what you're trying to do, and they are prepared for it.
Bro, okay, so she not only is she trying to stop you, but she's snitching too. Yo, why is she so hell bent on this loop? That's so random.
That's her.
Is going to try and break the loop and is bound to the Eon program. So, protocol is in effect. Protect your visionaries, kill cults, and have a fulfilling day.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
Good luck. One
Okay, so it's part of some kind of program. That's still like I probably need to like check out the lore because that's
of the most
interesting.
famous
I
games
want to
that
know like what kind of program they would have that would want them to keep the loop going forever and ever.
does
That's kind
this
of
is Outer
eh.
Wilds, an indie game from 2019. And since this is a video essay that includes Outer Wilds, I feel like I'm legally required to tell you that this game is best left as unspoiled as possible, and for that reason, I will limit the information I give you to what you can find in the first 30 minutes. In the first few minutes of the game, something happens to you when you interact with an ancient artifact from a prior civilization. After this, you gain the ability to wake up at the beginning of the day whenever you die without having forgotten anything that happened in any of the prior loops. Whether you fall from a great height, burn to a crisp in the sun, or accidentally step out of your ship without your spacesuit on for the 12th time this playthrough, you wake back up at
That's
the
genuinely
beginning of
funny.
that same day. The people around you are completely oblivious to this fact, and they have no recollection of anything that has happened. This scenario grants your character the ability to learn several lifetimes worth of knowledge regarding this prior civilization and the nature of this time loop that you're stuck in. That's all I'm going to say. Go play Outer Wilds. Time loops are a fun and engaging way of incorporating your character's death and respawning into the game's mythos. Because time loops come with an inherent mystery or a puzzle that you need to solve in order to escape this loop. And
Uh-huh.
that always tickles the part of my brain that really likes to be tickled. As somebody who has a strong
Like it's like that 12 minutes game where you know weird stuff happens.
affinity for puzzles and
That is what it's
mysteries and
called, right?
having those
The one of
eureka
Willem
moments
Dafoe.
of
Hold up.
discovery, I find it very hard to criticize time loop games because I just like them. Perhaps the most common reason a video
Yeah,
game will tell you
that's what it's
why
called.
you respawn is that there is some sort of magic or science or law of nature at play. Death Stranding is one of those games. It's a game that's all about death. In the game's lore, there is a plane of existence called the Beach, which lies in between the land of the living and the realm of the dead. The whole premise of Death Stranding is that our world and the beach collided and caused catastrophes across the globe in what is known as the Death Stranding. Rain now causes whatever it touches to age rapidly, urine can be turned into piss grenades, and Conan O'Brien is wearing an otter hat. Because of this entanglement between the lands of the living and the dead, the spirits of those who die don't have anywhere to go and they remain tethered to their bodies. If they remain in this state for too long without the bodies being destroyed, the spirit and the body will reunite and create a beached thing, or a BT. And if a BT consumes a living being, what is known as a void out will occur, which is basically an explosion in the force of a nuclear bomb. In Death Stranding, you play as Sam Porter Bridges, who is one of the few people who can defy death because he is a repatriate. What this means is if he is killed, he's able to navigate his own soul back into his body and revive himself. This unique ability is what allows Sam to take on the dangerous task of trekking across all of North America to try to restart civilization after the apocalypse occurred.
Bro, what is that? What did I just look at? I like I look was locked out for that part. Like, bro, what was I looking at? That's so crazy.
Hades is a game in which you play as Zagreus, who is the son of Hades, who is the Greek god of the underworld. You were trying to escape the underworld by going
Yep.
through all of Hades' defenses while they are trying to drag you back into the underworld. In Greek mythology, when you die, you first have to cross the river Styx, and then, depending on what kind of a person you were, there are three different realms in the afterlife. Elysium is reserved for the best of the best, Asphodel is for the average people, and Tartarus is for the wicked. So, in Hades, naturally, since you start at the bottom, you play through these in reverse. You have to carve your way through Tartarus, and then Asphodel, and then Elysium, and finally you have to get through the Temple of Styx. If Zagreus dies before he makes it to the top, then he will just wind up back at home in the House of Hades, because that's where all the dead go. It's a pretty seamless way of canonizing your character's death, revival, and their experience carrying over from one life to the next.
Seems
Okay.
fate
Yeah.
still doesn't want you dead.
Man, FromSoft just be like spamming in all their games. They're like, yeah, we're gonna give you a reason why you're alive. I didn't even know Sekiro had an in-game explanation for why you come back.
From Software, the creators of Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and Sekiro, they often intertwine death and revival into the lore of their games because you die a lot in these games. Some of
Yeah,
the lore
yeah.
explanations are integral to the game's plot, and I don't want to
Don't get me started on Malekith specifically. This mother, bro. No one has killed me as much as Malekith. A close second would probably be. Wait, no, I've spent like 10 hours on Mesmer. Okay, so Mesmer might have killed me the most, but then it was Malekith, and then Radagon and the Elden Beast. This stupid ass Two-Face fight. Whatever.
spoil everything for all of these games, so I will be intentionally vague in some of these instances. For the most part, FromSoft uses one of two reasons. Either you are kept alive by a boon from a divine being who wants to keep you around for a higher purpose, or there is some sort of curse on the land that prevents you and possibly others from dying. Dark Souls
Yep.
lore consists of a curse called the Dark Sign that keeps people from dying permanently. Instead, their souls keep coming back to their bodies, and they continue to do so until the individual loses their will to continue, and they essentially become a hollow shell.
Okay. Yeah. With Elden Ring though, there is a caveat, right? Like, once you get the Rune of Death back from Malekith, because you want to kill a god, mm, that doesn't necessarily mean that you add it back to the Elden Ring, bringing death back. You just use it to kill Radagon. Interesting. But I need to look more into that lore because I look he was thinking like when you get the rune back from Malekith, does it bring death back into the lands between? But you don't necessarily add it back to the Elden Ring. You just use it to kill the Elden
In
Beast.
Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, you have Lord Kuro, who is the divine heir to the dragon's blood and to whom you are sworn to protect, and he is able to revive you with the power of his blood. However, this comes at a cost because an overuse of this ability has the potential of infecting the land with a deadly plague. And in Elden Ring, the lands between is cursed so that everyone who lives there is unable to die because the Elden Ring is a literal ring that holds everything together, and the
Hmm.
rune of death has been removed from the ring, which means that permanent death has effectively been removed from the laws of nature in the lands between. In Sifu, you are a 20-year-old martial arts
Sifu. I knew it was coming.
expert on a quest for vengeance against the people who killed your father 8 years prior. The ace that you have up your sleeve with this one is that you are in possession of a magical pendant that can bring you back from the dead. This does come at a cost, however, as each use of the pendant ages the protagonist, and repeated use ages them at an accelerated rate. So you start the game out at age 20. Then when you die, you age up a year, so you're 21. If you die again before reaching the next checkpoint, then you'll age 2 years, so you'll be 23, and then 3 years, and so on. Checkpoints reduce the count all the way back to 1. If you get too old, then the next death will reset you back to the beginning of the game at age 20. However, the knowledge you gained and the skills that you've mastered can carry over, so even restarting the game after a game over screen is canon to Sifu's lore. I do like the way that
Yeah.
this game approaches death and mortality because you retain the wear and tear of your deaths on your character. So all of the god gamers out there can end the game with their character still at age 20, whereas a protagonist controlled by me will defeat the final boss and immediately check themselves into a retirement home so they can play shuffleboard and get duped by AI generated images on Facebook for the last couple years that they have left.
That's funny.
This way of explaining your character's respawn by saying that the laws of nature bend to them is kind of a way to show that your protagonist is exceptional or they are special or chosen in this world. And this is probably the most common way that games explain why your character is respawning because it is the most simple to implement into a game. The ones that I have highlighted in this section of the video are ones that I think are pretty exceptional or really interesting to think about, but most of the time it's just like, yeah, there's a chamber that can revive you. Before we wrap this video up, I want to briefly touch on one more way that games can deal with the game continuing after your character dies, and that
This game looks familiar, but I don't think I've ever heard of
is
it.
by canonizing your character's death and making you be an entirely new character. The whole point of Watch
Oh,
Dogs
okay.
Legion is you are assembling a rebellion. You are standing up to corrupt governments and corporations in a way that you can only see in a Ubisoft game. Sorry. And the permanent mode in this game makes it so if any member of your legion dies, they don't respawn. They're gone forever. You got to be somebody else. And if they all die, it's game over. Rogue Legacy's entire plot revolves around how if you die, the next character to take on the task of defeating the dungeon bosses is one of your descendants with different stats, abilities, weaknesses that are entirely different from your previous characters. Some of them might have
Mm,
ADHD, which means the game goes fast. Some might be colorblind. It's kind of crazy. As I have
it's
mentioned
a
at
pretty
the end
cool
of most
concept.
of my videos, I don't think video games should be required to explain every video game mechanic within their lore. In fact, I gave some examples in this video of games that are better off without doing that. However, I do enjoy games that are written in such a way that they can give a lore explanation for why you respawn, if they choose to do so. In the cases of some of these games, it's just a little bit of like a, oh, that's kind of cute, but in others, it can be a core part of the game's entire mythology. And it's something
Mm.
that for nerds like me, it really adds to the experience. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for the privilege of your time. I hope this was a worthwhile watch while you were eating your food.
Yep, it was a worthwhile watch. I was not eating though. Now I'm gonna spend 3 hours watching more Elden Ring lore videos to figure out about the Death Moon. But that was games were respawning as canon. Channel is not freaking Nick. Check it out. I hope y'all enjoy the video. Later.